In our previous episode, we looked at the hard evidence of the Tower of Babel, focusing on the early Mesopotamian tablets, stelas, and early Uruk period stone documents that corroborate biblical scripture. As presented, both the Old Testament Genesis account as well as the Mesopotamian records state that there was a massive dispersal of people to every corner of the earth. On this episode, I'm going to delve deep into one of these dispersing groups headed east and what their early records show us. This group still exists today as a nation and holds the key to unlocking their connections to the Tower of Babel and how we, as the human race, are all connected as one people. This group I refer to as the Chinese. Now let's just rewind for a moment and see if the timelines can even make this possible. If we look at the date of 1993 AM for the Tower of Babel, that brings us to our Gregorian calendar of approximately 1932 BC. That would set a time of approximately 4,000 to 4,500 years ago. This aligns with the earliest historiographical records in China. Earliest written records are from the Shang dynasty, which is 1600 BC, which followed the Xia, the first dynasty as stated in the Bamboo Annals. These people lived along the Yellow River in northern China. Today, the Chinese consider this region along the Yellow River as the cradle of Chinese civilization. But the incredibly reliable evidence comes from the written language of traditional Mandarin. Being that Chinese is the oldest, continuous, written language in the world, it proves to be the best script to analyze for this study. What we find is nothing short of astounding. Having personally lived in China for over 12 years, I've had the opportunity to discover and study this remarkable key. Upon my arrival at the beginning of 2005, I befriended Shenzhen University professor Shijian He, an expert scholar of Chinese history. It was from him that I learned about how the Chinese written language was formed as logogram pictographs. What makes the Chinese written characters so unique and so important to us is that by examining these pictograms, we can discover the hidden meanings in each of these early characters. Many of the Chinese characters comprise a number of compound pictographs that tell a story, all encoded within the characters themselves. Chinese pictographs are quite literally drawn depictions that represent its meaning, much like Egyptian hieroglyphs. However, many of these characters are combined to make new characters for more complex ideas. For example, the character for elder brother is Kou, R, which is Xiong. This character combination here literally translates as mouth son. Well-known history and common everyday things were used to form a word so that the people could remember it. What we are about to see in a number of Chinese characters will testify to the biblical pre-Babel world. The characters themselves have preserved this history that ties the Chinese people to Shem, Noah, and ultimately the first man and woman, Adam and Eve. Let's take a look at a number of them in detail. The word for God is written as Shangdi, written much earlier than Taoism, Confucianism, or Buddhism. This is known as the singular supreme creator God, and, interestingly, animal sacrifices was offered to him. According to the historical records in China, Shangdi has exactly the same character, nature, and power as the God of the Old Testament. The earliest dynasties mentioned above worshipped this Shangdi. We have Shang, meaning above, on high, and Di, meaning emperor or king. This literally is called the King on High. Records show he was also called Tian for short, meaning heaven. They took the word Da, means great or big, and added the upper stroke to emphasize he was greater and higher than they. Now check this out. Genesis 2:7 states, "Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." When we put together the following words, tu for earth or dust, ko for breath or mouth, and this stroke meaning alive, we get gao, meaning to talk or inform. Now when we combine the word gao with the ancient word for walk, chuo, we get zao, meaning create. This is profound, considering the word for create, we get the words for dust, breath, mouth, and alive. When we take the stroke for alive plus tu, meaning earth dust, plus ar, meaning man or legs, we get the word qian, meaning first, as in the first man brought to life from the dust of the earth. Genesis 2:8 states, "And God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed." If we take yi for one and ar, meaning man, plus wei for enclosure or garden, we get xi, meaning west, as in the western direction. Now, from China, the Garden of Eden would be to the west. This character reveals how the man is entering the garden. It could also suggest that the man is being removed from the garden as per what took place after they sinned. Another representation for God is this character, the left radical form shizipang, is God. Add this character at one, yi with a mouth, ko, in the garden, tian, and we get fu, meaning prosperity. God made Adam and Eve prosperous with all they needed in the garden, according to Genesis 2:15. Another word for garden is yuan. The components that make up yuan is fascinating. Let's take a look. We see tu, or clay, then God breathed with his mouth, ko, giving life to the man, and out of his side came forth a woman, cuan, and put them in the garden enclosure, wei. The word for forest is lin, represented as two trees. In Genesis 2:16-17 specifically mentions the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the latter tree being forbidden to eat of. If we look at lin plus shi, bring to attention, show or important, this creates the word jin, meaning forbidden. Just a coincidence? Let's keep going. In Genesis 3:6-8, we learn about how Eve was tempted by Satan to cause her to desire to eat from the forbidden tree. If we take lin plus nu for woman, we get the word lan, meaning to covet, desire, or greed. Next, if we take guang, meaning cover or canopy, plus lin, the two trees, plus gui, meaning devil or Satan, we get the word mo, meaning seduce, tempt, or charm. Now, after they sinned, they hid from God. We see how the body, shen, plus is or be, called nai, is behind a single tree, mu. Here we get the combined character of duo. What's the meaning? To hide. Interestingly, if we take duo, meaning man, plus guo, meaning the fruit, we interestingly get the word luo, meaning naked or nude. Alternatively, if we take yi for clothing, plus guo, meaning fruit, we also get an alternate word for naked, luo. And can you recall, the character for God, shen, is extremely similar to yi, the clothing, only one small stroke added. Why? It was God who provided clothing for Adam and Eve after they sinned. Man's guilt of sin separated him from fellowship with God, but God provided a way for man's relationship with him to be restored through sacrifice. Just as in the story from the Bible, the ancient Chinese people knew that the sacrifice of a lamb brought righteousness and God's favor, according to Genesis 4:4. If we take the word shou, meaning hand, plus ge, meaning dagger or axe, we get the word wo, meaning me or I. From here, if we take wo and add it to yang, meaning sheep or lamb, we get the word yi, meaning, now get ready for this, righteousness. Now put this all together and you roughly get, in my hand I take my dagger against the lamb and achieve righteousness. Historically, lambs were never used for animal sacrifice in China. Just another strong piece of evidence connecting the early Chinese people to the Semitic culture. We know the very first murder ever committed involved Cain killing his brother Abel, right? Well, check this out. The word for brother is xiong. If we break open the head on this character and add an X stroke inside of it, we have this character, xiong, meaning a bad omen. Replace this on the previous brother character, and we get the word xiong, yes, it's pronounced identically, means violent, murder. We can also look at the mark on the head of Cain, xiong, given to him as he was sent away in exile. Now, if that's not exciting enough, get ready for this. In Genesis 6:11 through 18, we read the story of God commanding Noah to build an ark so that he, his wife, and 3 sons and their wives, and all the animals to escape God's coming judgment on the wicked world in the form of a global flood. That meant there were 8 people on the ark. If we take the number ba, meaning 8, plus ko, and on its own this means mouth, but with a number above it, it means the number of people, yan, plus zhou, meaning boat, we get chuan, which is representative for a large ship or vessel. When we take the same number, ba meaning 8, and gong meaning united, plus yi, which is simplified earth, we get the character gong meaning total. Then we take gong plus shui, which is the radical form of water, we get the word hong meaning flood. This is nothing short of astounding. In flood, we see the number 8, united, and earth. How did the ancient people of China know these things specifically? Conventionally, Chinese history is not supposed to include the biblical view of creation or of Noah's flood narratives, yet here we plainly see them otherwise. The stories were actually handed down by word of mouth from 8 people who were the total population of the earth after the flood, and the Chinese were sure to record it in their new written language. That's why, when we take the word kou, meaning mouth, plus the number 8, ba, plus shui, the water, we get the word yan, meaning to hand down or continue. That is just crazy. Now why stop there? There is really so much more we cannot cover. However, since we are looking to tie the Chinese culture to the Tower of Babel narrative, let's look into where the two are connected. The word for tower is written as ta. They break down as tu, meaning soil or dirt, plus cao, meaning grass, plus ren, meaning people, plus yi, which is the number 1, and kou, meaning mouth. This explains that the tower's construction was made mixing dirt with grass as asphalt for bricks. What is very interesting here is that when you take the last 3 characters, ren plus yi plus kou, to make he, it is the Chinese word for united. We know from Genesis 11:1, now the whole earth had one language and one speech. This says the people were united as one prior to the Great Division. So there we can see so clearly that Chinese characters tell a story in a single word like ta, meaning tower. It is nothing short of fascinating. One more part of the tower story. God confused their languages and scattered them. The word for tongue is she. Then we add a single man's leg, here, meaning to walk in a single direction. This leaves us with the character luan, meaning confusion. This tells us that the languages or tongues were confused and they were scattered in various directions. Essentially, the Chinese would have migrated from present-day Iraq when God scattered the people after the fall of the tower. The word for migration is qian. In this character, we have da, meaning great, plus xian, meaning division, plus xi, meaning the direction of west, plus chuo, meaning walk. What do we have? From the west, they were divided from other groups and walked a great distance. This event was significant as described by Great Division. It is amazing what the Chinese language reveals to us about their roots, their connection to the early accounts of Genesis, and how we are all connected to one people all the way back to Noah. And God did not forsake any of these people groups. They scattered to their new lands with knowledge of God and their history like everyone else. They only slowly forgot who their God was as time progressed, just like what is happening today in the West. Take a look at the people all over the world. India, Asia, Africa, so many countries don't know the same God as we do, but they did at one time. As a fitting piece, a final piece to this puzzle, as we wrap up our analysis of the Tower of Babel story, we'll piece together one final Chinese character for you. As we allow the Chinese written language to tell us of one important lesson, it reminds us that as God's children, we need to know that we are saved not by works, not by knowledge, but by faith. By looking at the character for faith, Xin, we see that we have a man, Ren, that uses his mouth to speak, Yan, a confession that will bring to faith a grace that will lead to salvation. Join me next time where we explore Genesis 1 and the creation of life on Earth by looking deep into the building blocks of life and the evidence of intelligent design, here on Evidence Uncovered.